A son strayed from his family's faith and disappointed his mom and dad. Nevertheless, the father prayed for him faithfully every day. One day, out of the blue, after having made no contact with his parents for months and months, he called. He said, "Dad, I've watched your Christian life all through the years. I've seen how faithful you are. I know I haven't been who you wanted me to be, but I just wanted you to know that I just recommitted my life to Christ, and I want you to be the first to hear about it." People who can be reached in no other way can be reached through prayer. There are people you know in your family who are not followers of Christ. Maybe they made commitments at some point, but they don't seem too interested now. You've tried everything you can to reach them, but they seem to have little interest. Could be a son or daughter, brother or sister, mom or dad, mate, friend, work associate. Your counsel and attempts to reach them seem to fall on deaf ears. You've experienced this frustration, right? Don't give up. Pray. Prayer is the secret weapon of every believer. People can tune out your words, ignore your emails, but they're defenseless against your prayers. I'd like to talk to you today about prayer. And I'd like to begin by asking you a simple quiz. Answer yes or no, just to yourself. Are you satisfied, number one, are you satisfied with your prayer life? Yes or no? 2, after you pray, are you confident God will answer your prayer? Yes or no? 3, can you name 5 specific requests you ask God for this week? Yes or no? 4, when someone says to you, "Pray for me," do you? And finally, since effective prayer requires that we know God's promises, could you state 5 or 10 of God's promises? Yes or no? If you answered 3 or more no's, my message is especially for you. This is the third in a series of messages called The Land Between. If you're just joining us, let me catch you up. The people of Israel were delivered by God from slavery in Egypt through many mighty miracles. God promised them the land of Canaan as their inheritance. They traveled through the Sinai to Canaan, but they weren't there yet. They were in the land between Egypt and Canaan. Maybe you're in the land between school and a job, between a bad medical diagnosis and hoping for the best, between a divorce and starting over, between the death of a loved one and regrouping, between the end of one ministry and wondering what you're going to do next. The people of Israel traveled through the Sinai to Canaan, and before they went in to claim the land, God said, "Send 12 leaders in there to spy out the land." Here's what happened. "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the Israelites. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified?" 40 days later, they bring their report. "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey." In other words, they have lots of crops, and here is its fruit. "But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there." We can't attack these people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak." These are like giants. David fought Goliath. We believe Goliath was 9 feet tall. So these are the descendants. "Come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." 10 of the spies gave a negative report. In spite of all God had done in bringing them out of Egypt, they didn't believe that God could bring them into the land of Canaan. The negative thinking was so abhorrent to God that we read. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the signs I have performed among them?" Remember, he turned the Nile River into blood. He had a plague of frogs, a plague of flies, plague of darkness. I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they. At this point, Moses prayed for the people, offering one of the greatest prayers in the Bible. Before we look at the prayer, I want you to see what God responded to Moses. The Lord replied, "I have forgiven them as you asked." God answered Moses' prayer and forgave the people. When you pray, do you feel like your prayers get above the ceiling? Do you have confidence that when you pray, God has heard you and will answer your prayer? Maybe you're not a believer, but you pray. One question I'm asked, probably more frequently than any other, is, why didn't God answer my prayer? Not all prayers are equal. We need to learn how to pray. We learn from Moses how to pray with power. He teaches us how to stand in the gap for people who have strayed from him. The most important thing you can do for people is to pray. But we need to learn how to pray. Do you want to learn how to pray effectively? You can pray with power. Moses shows us 4 of the most important ways to pray with power. There are a lot of great prayers in the Bible, but this one is at the top of the list, certainly in the top 3. First, make requests that bring God honor. When God suggested that he felt like destroying the people and starting over with a new people, here's what Moses prayed. Then the Egyptians will hear about it. If you kill all these people, by your power, you brought these people up from among them. The Egyptians saw all the things that God did, and they will tell the inhabitants of this land about it. They have already heard that you, Lord, are with these people, and that you, Lord, have been seen face to face, that your cloud stays over them, and that you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. The people of Israel were famous. Everybody heard about what God did in Egypt in bringing them out. Everybody heard about this. Everybody was afraid of them. If you put all these people to death, leaving none alive, the nations who have heard this report about you will say, the Lord was not able to bring these people into the land, which he promised them on oath. So he slaughtered them in the desert. Moses is saying, Lord, the Egyptians and the Canaanites, and Canaanites is shorthand for all the other people in the Middle East. They've all heard about your great power. They're impressed. But if you put all these people to death, all your credit will become zilch. Your honor is at stake, God. They'll get the false impression that you're feeble when you're not able to bring the people in to the land. God, your reputation is at stake. That's powerful praying. Moses wasn't praying for himself, for his glory, his advancement. He was praying for God and his reputation. If you make a request to God and you say, God, I believe this will bring you credit. This will bring you honor. That's a prayer that's likely to be in God's will and will be answered. When I started as pastor of Sunset Presbyterian Church, before I arrived, there was a non-Christian preschool there, and they had pretty much free run of the building because the church was very small and had no children. And, the church began to grow rapidly, and then there were lots of kids, and so then we began to use all the classrooms. Well, then we had to communicate more with the preschool. They said to us, well, we don't like the pictures you put up of Jesus and stuff, so could you take them down before Monday morning. Well, that didn't go over well with our teachers and the leaders of the church, and they began to complain that we were using their stuff, and our people felt like they were stealing our things, and tensions mounted. Eventually, our Sunday school grew so large that it was impossible to continue to have them there. So the board and I voted that they needed to move out by the next fall. Well, when we told them that, all hell broke loose. They began to send letters and emails saying, hey, we were breaking our contract. We were not Christian. They began to say, I was the most terrible person in the world. I remember praying. I said, God, I don't care what they say about me. That doesn't matter. But don't let your name be dragged through the mud, lest people be lost to your church. Well, in a few weeks, they had found a new place where they could have their preschool, and the whole problem blew over. Best of all, some of the people that had children in that preschool began to attend our church, and God blessed our church. If you want your prayers to be answered, consider things that will bring God honor and pray for those things. Second, the second way to pray with power, make requests God promises to grant. Moses continues his prayer. Now, may the Lord's strength be displayed, just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sin of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now. Moses made requests that God had already promised to grant. Moses prayed for God to hold his anger, be patient and forgiving to the people. He's asking God, be who you already are. He was saying, you've already promised that our people have always been negative and pessimistic, God, and you've forgiven them. You've promised to be patient with them and forgive them. So grant your promise. Nika Maples was all alone in the hospital. Lupus had ravaged her body, slurred her speech, and blurred her eyesight. She could not walk, sit up, or move. She could eat only the smallest of bites. She breathed in gasps and spurts. Sleep came stubbornly, if at all. The doctors were bewildered. Nika's family was terrified. She was only 20 years old, and her body was shutting down. By the time she was admitted to ICU at the hospital in Fort Worth, Texas, doctors were fearing for her survival. On one particular night, she couldn't sleep. And so she felt like she could sleep if somebody would hold her hand. But she couldn't talk. There's no way for her to ask for comfort. She could tell her mom was already sleeping, hearing her breathing. And so she prayed, God, what's this? Watch, there we go. God, I need you. I can't go to sleep tonight. Will you please send someone to hold my hand? I can't tell anyone what I need, can't ask anyone. Will you please just tell mom or a nurse or somebody to hold my hand? Minutes passed slowly. The rotating mattress rolled her onto her side. Then it returned her to her back. As it did, someone walked into the room. The scent of the skin was unfamiliar, but clearly there were soft, masculine tones. His steps made no noise. His mother did not stir at all. Her mother did not stir at all. She tried to open her eyes, but she couldn't. Nika drifted off to sleep. When she awoke, hours later, he was still holding her hand. Her mother slept across the room. Nika again tried to open her eyes. This time she succeeded. Through her blurry eyes, she looked, but there was no one there. The pressure on her hand stopped. Nika is confident that Christ came to hold her hand. Jesus promised to never leave her or forsake her. So she prayed for him to send someone, her mom or a nurse or someone, and he came himself. She was asking for a request God had already promised to grant. The promises in God's word are many. But in order for you to pray them, you have to know them. That's why this year I urge you, take a few minutes every day and read the Bible. Use our journals so you can know God's promises. Then you can ask God to grant his promises. Third, make requests God has granted in the past. Remembering God's answers to prayer in the past is what kept Joshua and Caleb from going negative. We read, Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. These two are the ones that gave the positive report. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Keeping their focus on what God had done in the past kept them from being afraid. They remembered the miracles God had done in bringing them out of Egypt and through the Sinai. And they asked him to do it again. We're amazed at how quickly the Hebrews forgot all God's many miracles. But we're not that different. God will answer some prayer and we're all happy. And then, a few hours later, we're all in a twit about some new problem we face. If you want to live by faith, recall the ways God has been gracious to you in the past and ask him to answer those again. On July 7th, Jory and I flew to London to see our son Luke. We were only off the plane a few hours when we went bike riding. And we were riding in Hyde Park, with hundreds of bikers. And coming the opposite way came a biker. We were crossing an intersection. He was going at least 20 miles an hour, just ran right into Jory. She flew this way, he flew that way. And she couldn't walk on her knee. So we went to the hospital and they say, you've torn your ACL. So we cut short our trip and flew back for her to have surgery. So we got back and we have spent most of our time trying to help Jory get well and get her knee well. I had some time on my hands, and so I kind of looked around the house and the property, some projects that needed to be done, and I saw we have a couple horses, and one of our horses wanted to eat in the barn, so he had chewed on the barn and kind of messed up one of the doors. So I went out to kind of replace it and fix it. So I had a power drill. I was undoing screws and had a drill bit and the thing it goes into. And so I was, removing, doing what I was doing. But it didn't fit tightly. So every time I would turn the drill down, the drill bit would fall to the ground. The drill bit is gray and the rocks are gray. And so every time that would happen, I'd have to look around for, 30 seconds, a minute. And I'd say, God, could you help me find the drill bit? I don't want to go back to the garage and get a new one. And I'd find it. And then a little later, I forget again, and I drop it, and then I'd do the same prayer again. God, would you help me find the drill bit? And I'd look around. Finally, I'd find it. It happened 6 times. 6 times I made the same request. God, you just helped me a few minutes ago. Would you help me again? Do you remember how God has helped you in the past in a job situation? Or a difficulty in your marriage, or with your children, or with a friend? Remember what God has done in the past and ask him to do the same things today. Joshua and Caleb agreed with the negative naysayers that the cities were strong, large, and fortified. They heard them say, you can't argue with the facts. These people are bigger than we are. We can't do it. They watched them demonstrate a negativity bias. But they remembered the miracles God had done in the past, in Egypt and through the Sinai. And they asked him to do it again. Friday night, Jory and I took 2 of our daughters, Jamie and Erica, to the rodeo in Canby. About 16 years ago, on July 28, 2008, they were having a rodeo in Graham, Texas, and champion roper Freddie Vest was preparing for his 4th ride in the calf roping event. He was riding his horse when all of a sudden he fell off on the ground. He had a cardiac arrest. His friend rushed to him, put his hand under his head, and began to pray for him. A firefighter came and began doing CPR on his chest. The firefighter could hear people all around the stadium to begin to pray for Freddie. I believe it, because at the Canby Rodeo, they began the event with prayer, and they ended it in Jesus' name. And so this kind of stuff happens in the rodeo world. And so people were all over, were praying. It was like he was on the altar and they were all praying for Freddie. For 45 minutes, people did CPR on Freddie. They were trying to give Freddie every opportunity to survive. The ambulance paramedics continued CPR while en route to Graham Hospital, and they defibrillated his heart twice. He was airlifted to a hospital in Fort Worth. During the flight, his heart had to be restarted 2 more times. Once he was in the hospital and in surgery, the family held like a prayer, a vigil. Dr. Denzel DeSosa came out and told the family that only 9% of cardiac arrest patients survive. He said every minute that passes without defibrillation or restoration of blood flow, your mortality goes up 10%. For the brain, he says you got 5, 6, 10 minutes at the most to survive. So he was concerned about the long-term prognosis for Freddie. Freddie, as it turns out, saw the prayers of the people. He said, I was very peaceful. I felt like I was being held by God, like in a rocking embrace. He said, God enabled me to see the prayers. First there was 1 bolt of light. Then there were 2. Then there were 3. Then there were 10. Then there were 100. Each bolt of light represented somebody who sent up a prayer for Freddie. He said, then there were thousands of bolts of light. And then it got so bright, God sent me back. Prayer saved Freddie's life. Freddie's situation looked hopeless. Very few people would have recovered from a heart not beating that long. But people in the stadium had seen God do miracles before, and they asked him to do it again. There's one final step toward powerful praying. If you only get one thing out of this message, make it this one. Now, you've heard me say this before, but this is not just a ploy. I'm serious. Of the 4 things, this one is the most simple to remember and the most important thing you can always pray to make a powerful prayer. Ask God to show mercy. Moses prayed. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sin of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generation. Moses realized that God is just. He cannot leave sin unpunished. Forgiveness does not dismiss consequences for sin. Moses didn't pray for the people not to be punished, but he prayed for God to show mercy and preserve the nation. To that end, Moses' prayer was effective. God assured Moses that he would forgive the people. But then God continued, nevertheless, as surely as I live and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors. So none of the people over the age of 20, the age of accountability, who didn't believe that God could bring him into Canaan, ever went into Canaan. They had to stay in the Sinai 40 more years until all of them died. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit, he was one of the positive reports, and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land, and he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. So for nearly 40 years, the people wandered in the Sinai until all those who didn't believe died. Then Moses prays, get this, in accordance with your great love, forgive the sin of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now. Moses accepted that God would punish the people, but he asked God to show mercy. Asking God to show mercy is always a good prayer, because that is who God is. A successful businessman owned hundreds of acres of orange groves. One winter, it was predicted that there was going to be a hard freeze. This was very unusual in this part of the country. So this man knew, in the natural, things did not look good. Looked like he was going to have no crop for the year ahead. But he also knew this principle, that God is merciful, and that God could put a hedge around his property, put a distinction on his property. So he walked through his orange groves, and he said, God, show mercy to me. Put a protection around my trees. And he thanked him that he believed that he would do that. Well, when the other farmers heard that he had prayed for his trees, they laughed. They ridiculed him. How stupid. Well, a couple days later, the hard freeze came for over 24 hours. The other farmers were very discouraged. They had no crop for the year. They were wondering how they're going to make a living. But a couple weeks later, there was the most unusual sight. This Christian's property, his hundreds of acres of orange trees, they were beautiful. The trees were perfect. And all the properties around his property, the trees were all dead. It was like God had put a blanket over his trees. When the other farmers saw that, they didn't ridicule him anymore. They said to him, next time, will you pray for God to show mercy on us? Will you pray for our trees? He believed that God would be merciful to him. So he thanked him for watching over for his property. He asked God to show mercy. Ask God to show mercy. It's always a great way to pray. You can pray with power. How? Let's review. Number one, make requests that bring God honor. This is not that different from what you're already doing. Let's just use an example. You say, God, bless my business. Wouldn't you like God to bless your business? Bless your work? But to make it like this, you make just a little change. You say, God, this is not, it sounds like it's all about you, right? But you say, God, I want to honor you with my business. Everybody who walks in the door, I want them to feel the difference that I'm trying to honor you. I want to serve each person. I want to take care of my staff in an honorable way. And God, I'm going to obey your word. If you bless my business, I promise I will tithe. I'll give back 1/10 of all that you bless me with. That makes that a good prayer that'll be answered. Second, make requests God has promised to grant. You just look through the Bible. What has God already promised? And you ask him to do that. Third, make requests God has granted in the past. You just think back. God, you did this before. Do it again. I know you can do it again. And then finally, most important of all and most simple to remember, ask God to show mercy. Whatever situation you're in, God, show me mercy. That's a great prayer. Father, thank you for this example of prayer from Moses. We want to pray. We do pray. Everybody here prays. We'd like to know that you hear us and that you'll answer us. We'd like to make our prayers better, so we're committing to that today. If you're not sure where you stand with God, you could just say, God, I believe Jesus is your son. I believe he rose from the grave. I want him in my life. Come in and forgive my sin. And if you want to tell God you want to pray better, pray more effectively, just tell him right now. I'll give you 30 seconds to pray before I close. You pray. Lord, thank you that you invite us to pray. You want us to talk to you. And you're merciful. You love us. You love to grant answers to prayer. May we experience that this week. In Jesus' name, amen. So take your program once again. Love for you to take the communication card, put your name on there, give us information about yourself if you think we don't have it. And then check any next steps you want to take today. Whenever we hear from the Bible, it's important to take a next step.